Do you know the difference between believing in Christ and abiding in Christ? You're about to. Hey, I'm Lucas Kitchen, and welcome to episode 12 of Salvation and Discipleship. Is there a difference? If you've got your study guide, which you can get at simplybelief.com/grow, go ahead and look at number 12, which says, believe in Christ under salvation and abide in Christ under discipleship. So let's take a look at the verses that come underneath both of those categories. First, we're going to talk about what it means to believe in Christ. Now, we've talked about this in a number of other episodes, so we're going to hit this really quick. Let's look at John 3, verse 18. He who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. So he tells us that judgment and condemnation is awaiting all people who don't believe in Christ. However, he does give hope here, and he says that anybody who believes in Christ gets to skip out on that condemnation. Now, we've talked about this a number of times, and in fact, the verses that come right before this tell us that if someone believes in Christ or believes in the Son of God, who's Jesus, then they have everlasting life. So, those who have everlasting life are saved. So, believing in Christ is a salvation issue, no question about it. Faith alone in Christ brings salvation. But that brings up a really important question then. What's the difference between believing in Christ and abiding in Christ? Are those the same thing, or are those different? We're going to find out today that it's actually something different. So, to get a basic definition of what it means to abide in Christ, let's look at 1 John 3, verse 24. Now, he who keeps his commandments abides in him. If you look at the section that comes right before this, it's talking about Christ's commandments to those who have believed in him. And then it tells us very straightforward here that if we keep those commandments, we abide in him. So, we have a basic definition of what it means to abide. Now, I want to make a quick point here. We talked about many times in previous episodes and this one that to believe in Christ is to accept the free gift of salvation by faith alone in him. It's not about works. It's not about doing good deeds. But here we find that abiding is about keeping commandments. So this can't be talking about salvation. It must be talking about discipleship. Let's add some more layers to what it means to abide. John 8:30 says this, as he spoke these words, many believed in him. It tells us that while Jesus was giving a speech to a group of people, some of those people believed in him. Now, that's that technical term that we've talked about in previous episodes. When it says that someone believed in him, believed in the Son of God, or believed in him as Christ, or something to that effect, we understand that to be a declaration of salvation. So these people, while they were listening to Jesus, believed in him and received everlasting life. They got saved right there in the audience. Now that's important because they didn't walk an aisle. They didn't bear fruit. They didn't do good works. They just believed in him. And so Jesus, recognizing that some of them had just believed, he addresses that sort of subgroup. So let's see what he has to say to them. Then Jesus said to those Jews who believed him, if you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is one of those great places where we see a clear distinction between salvation and discipleship. So we have this group of people that believed in Jesus and therefore got saved, but then Jesus says to them, now I expect you to abide. Now we know that it's not automatic because Jesus wouldn't have to tell them to abide if it was just going to magically happen. Instead, what we find is that he tells them to abide, and that will make them disciples indeed. And then he lays out a couple of benefits for abiding. He says you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So, abiding is a step beyond salvation. It could hardly be more clear here. So Jesus makes it very plain that to abide comes after salvation, but it's not automatic. It's something that people have to choose to do. So what is abiding? Abiding is all about discipleship. Let's look at John 15:5 to add yet another layer to this. I am the vine, You are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. Now, a lot of people have made much ado about this, saying that the one who doesn't abide must not be saved. But that's not what Jesus actually says here. What he says is that he wants those who have believed in him to abide for a particular purpose. What's the purpose? It's right there in the verse. The purpose of abiding is that they will bear fruit. And we understand that that is a metaphor for doing good works and following his commandments. So basically, abiding is about obeying. And so Jesus wants us to abide so that we will bear much fruit. But then he gives a consequence for those who don't abide. Did you see it? For without me, you can do nothing. He doesn't say that the one who doesn't abide will lose their salvation. I mean, it's not in the verse. It's not in the section. What he does say, though, is that you can do nothing if you don't abide. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll suddenly become a puddle of gelatin or something, that you'll just sit on the couch all day. But what he means is you'll be able to do nothing of value. You'll be able to bear no fruit if you don't abide. And in one place, he calls it abide in his word. So we need to understand what Christ taught, and then we need to also obey that. And that is the definition of abiding. Now, here's the good news. If you read the entire chapter of John 15, you'll find that there are a number of benefits laid out for abiding in Christ. And there's also a couple of consequences. In my book, Salvation and Discipleship, I list those benefits and consequences in this chapter. And I want to read those to you. Those who abide in Christ will become disciples, as it says in verse 8. Become Jesus' friend, verse 14. Bear much fruit, verse 5. Have answered prayer, verse 7. Glorify God, verse 8. Have the joy of Jesus, verse 11. Know the plans of God, verse 15. Be hated by the world, verse 18. And be persecuted by the world, verse 20. So, there are great benefits in this life and the life to come for those who abide in Christ. So believing in Christ is how we gain our salvation, but abiding in Christ is how we establish and maintain our discipleship, which has great rewards in this life and the life to come, above and beyond just having everlasting life. So if you want to go deeper, I would encourage you to get my book, Salvation and Discipleship, Is There a Difference? We also have a Bible study workbook, a study guide. Go to simplybelief.com/grow to get signed up for this Bible study and others. Thanks for watching, and I hope that today you abide in Christ.